So it's being recorded, and I'm going to send you the recording at the end sometime this morning. And I'm also going to post it in the Workkeys Online. So somewhere around here in one of those little cells, it will be the recordings. It will be the word recordings, and you just go there. Okay, so let's talk about Workkeys Online. So when you go to tasks for coordinators, and I emailed you all those tasks, but if you go there, so task number 3 was the one I sent you Friday. I know, you didn't want to do anything like that on the weekend. But I wanted you to start reading pages 1 through 25 on the online administration manual. And then there's the link for it. Task number 2 was to verify you had access to the Leadus. And I'm hoping that all of you were able to do that. And then task number 1 was joining the Canvas course. Okay, so let's go. I'm going back to home. Now let's talk about who should test. So I'm going to click on this, and let's read this. So number 1, LDOE will pay for any Jumpstart student classified as an 11th grade student who has never taken Workkeys. There's some bullets under there. If you have a Jumpstart student classified as a second year 11th grade student and took Workkeys last year as a first year 11th grade student, LDOE will not pay. Your school will pay. Second bullet under that. Do not give Workkeys to any other 11th grade student. Your school will pay for this. So the only juniors who you can give Workkeys to are the Jumpstart students who have never taken who have never taken Workkeys before. All students classified as 11th grade student, unless they are Elite Connect, will take ACT test in March. All right, before I go on to number 2, any questions on what I just read? All right, now, Rashada, yes. You should. Okay, no, thank you. What probably happened was when I got disconnected, let me go ahead and reshare. Can y'all see it now? Y'all can see it now? Okay, yeah, that's what happened. For some reason, the internet was having an issue a while ago, and it disconnected me. And I'm at the office. I'm not home, so I'm not sure what's going on. All right, but thanks for letting me know. Everything is going to be shown to you, so if at any point you can't see it, let me know. So let me go back and show you where I was. So I went to home, and this is what it looks like so far. And if you could put your hand down, because the hands are still raised, and sometimes I think you have a question if it's raised. So, Shannon, Stephanie, Maria, Rashad, and Andrea, thank you. Okay, so everything's going to be here in the online course. So we just talked about task for coordinators. Today I'm going to put in one of those the word recordings, so that's where the recordings will be. And then you go who should test. So when I went there, I just read number 1 to you. So that's the one about the Jumpstart students. It's the same as last year. Those of you that were here last year, it's the same thing. Those of you that are new, you need to understand what this means. All right, so you're going to have to figure out who your Jumpstart students are at your school. And you can go into J Campus to do that. There's a code for Jumpstart students. So right now, figure out one of the things you got to do, and I'll put this as a task, but one of the things you have to do is figure out who's going to be testing for Workkeys online. And we're not doing paper-based. We're only doing online just like we did last year. Stephanie, you had a question? Your hands is raised. Stephanie? All right, so she must be away from the computer. At least I can. Okay, I'm gonna lower her hand for her. Oops, it didn't work. Oh, I guess it did. Yes. Okay, can the rest of you see? Okay. So Zaviola, all right, all right. Thank you, Karen. All right, thank you, Stephanie. Zaviola, yeah, go ahead and leave and come back on. Okay, so number two, you can give the Workkeys test to a senior who has taken the ACT test previously. Zaviola, can you see it now? Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. So we're on number two. So you can give the Workkeys test to a senior who has taken ACT tests previously. EBR will pay for either the 12th grade student to take, will pay for the 12th grade student to take either Workkeys or ACT. So remember, we don't pay for both. We pay either the senior to take the Workkeys or the ACT. If your school, and I got to go back and fix some of the words. If your school will give the 12th grade student both, your school will pay for the ACT test. So the ACT test is $5 more. On average, a student that retakes the ACT test only improves by 1 or 2 points. So I want you to be aware of that. So here's what I'm saying. If you have a student who has an ACT score of 12, is there any chance, well, I shouldn't say that, is the chance high that the student will get at least an 18? What do y'all think? Any? No, not at all. So what I would do is if you now the 12 is still a low score. What I would suggest you do is have the student take the Workkeys test instead of retaking the ACT test. Okay? Because now it's up to you. But if you give that student that scored a 12 on the ACT test, that chances are that student is not going to give you any points. Will not score an 18. Right. So, but on average, these students that retake the test will only improve by 1 or 2 points. Sometimes they go lower. They don't improve. Sometimes they stay the same. Once in a while, you'll get a student that will make 4 or 5 points higher. And ACT does investigate that. So when they see a student get that much of improvement, they do investigate the testing environment and try and determine why the student improves so much. All right, number 3. For 2021, 22, LDOE will give the student the better of either the Workkeys or ACT, just like last year. Now here are the points awarded. Platinum, you'll get 120.4 towards your SPS for ACT. Remember, ACT is 25% of your SPS score, your high school SPS score. Gold is 103.4, and then silver is 7. There are no points for bronze. And then these are the credential level. For platinum, in order to be considered platinum, a student has to score at least a 6 on each of the 3 assessments for Workkeys. Gold, the student has to score at least a 5 on all 3. So the student scores a 5, a 6, and a 6, then it's a 5. They take the minimum of the scores. So silver, student has to score a 4 on each of at least a 4 in each of the 3 assessments. And then bronze, the student scores at least a 3 on each of the 3 assessments. So if a student has a 3, a 6, and a 6, what's their score? A 3, a 6, and a 6. 3. Okay. Yeah, you don't get any points. All right. Now, just like last year, remember you can retest, right? Do you have to test all of the tests again, or just the ones the student needs to improve on? Just the one that needs improvement. Okay. All right. So, any questions on what we just talked about? Just like last year and the year before, any 12th grader that took ACT. Yeah, remember, EBR will pay for one, not both. So if you give both, if you have a 12th grade student retake the ACT and also do Workkeys, you're paying for the retake of ACT. Okay, so one of the tasks you're going to have to do is determine, first of all, who your 11th grade Jumpstart students are, because ACT is going to pay, LDOE will pay for that. So you have to determine that, who your 11th grade Jumpstart students are. If you have any 11th grade students that are second year, chances are they took Workkeys last year. If you retest them, you're paying for that student. And then you're also going to have to determine your seniors, the students who are 12th grade, if you're going to have them either take the Workkeys or ACT test over. All right, your school will not pay for, if you decide to only have the senior take ACT and not Workkeys, we'll pay for it. You don't have any cost. But if you give both, you have a cost if you give both. Okay, any questions? All right, I'm going to go back to home. And I should go to let me go to student view, because this is what you would see. So this is what you would see. I'm going to go back to home. And then I want to go to the ACT index information. So this is the ACT index. So notice, those of you that are new, if a student scores 0 to 17, you get no points. If a student scores an 18 or a silver, you get 70 points, and so on. 22 gold is 103.4, 27 platinum is 120.4, and the highest number of points you can get is 150. And that's when a student scores a 36. Okay? But if ever you wanted to find out this information, remember it's in Canvas. So you just go to Canvas and that's where you're going to find this. All right, I'm going to go back. Any questions on this before I move on? All right, so I'm going to go to Home. And then the next part I have so far is the manuals. So when I click on Manuals, there are two of them. So the Administration Manual I sent to you in an email Friday. And then the Accessibility Support Guide, which I did not send to you, but it's here. So these two we're going to look at today. Not all of it, but parts of it. All right. Now let me see if anyone else showed up. Let's see. Okay. Fanny, Gail. All right. Fanny and Gail. I'm about to put the sign-in sheet in the chat. So if you can go to the chat to get the sign-in sheet for today. So I just put it in there. So if you can, there's only two questions: your name and your school's name. And we need that from now on. So every time we have a training, whether it's this or ANET, I'm going to put a Google form for you to fill out. All right. So, but thank you both for completing it. Okay, so before we go to the manuals, anything else that you have a question on? Now is your time. All right, now those of you that are new, there's a lot of stuff that you have to do to get ready for Workkeys Online. You have to upload students, and that's going to be something we're going to do in a couple of weeks. You have to upload students, you have to determine which ones need accommodations, and so forth. So that's going to be some of the tasks that you're going to have to deal with. All right, what I want to do first is this. All of you, and I asked you to make sure you did. All of you have access to Success, correct? Where you go for TAA. So I'm going to go there. If you don't, you let me know in an email so we can make sure you have access to this. So you go to success.act.org. All right, and you're going to then get this page. All right, then you're going to sign in. And if you forgot your password, just click on forgot password. So let's see. I'm hoping I do mine correctly. There's passwords for everything. Let's see. All right. Okay. All right. Now, when you get in, you're going to go. First thing I'm going to do is go to Pearson Access. But remember, one of the things you have to make sure you had was the tests, accessibility, and accommodations. You're going to need this for ACT, not for Workkeys. You're not going to do anything in here for Workkeys. You're only going to do something in here for ACT. All right, and that's going to start in, I think, around late October, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere around that. All right. So test, accessibility, and accommodations you're going to need for ACT. Are you going to do anything with this for Workkeys? Yes or no? Anyone? No. Okay, good. Now, I'm going to go to Pearson Access. So when I go to Pearson Access, and all of you have this, when you go to Pearson Access, it's going to bring you to a sign-in page. Your password may or may not be the same as for Success. Mine is not. So you're going to sign in into PANEX. We call it PANEX, by the way, for those of you that are new. So you're going to do your username, and then password. Let's see. My password, I think it's this. I hope it is. Okay. So this is PANEX. So that's where you're going to go, especially for ACT, to do some stuff there. At the top, you see Workkeys Fall 2021. You're not going to do anything with that because we're doing online. You would do something here if this was paper-based. We're not doing paper-based. We're doing online only. I don't think they put up ACT Spring 2022 yet. I don't see it. I don't think y'all have it either. Alright. But what I wanted you to do here when we got to this page, see where it says Louisiana State Testing web page? Go there. You're going to probably spend some time here from now until April of 2022. Notice they have ACT test. We're going to talk about that in an ACT training. This is Workkeys. You have Workkeys on paper, we're not going to do, but we are going to do Workkeys online. So when you click on Workkeys Online resources, go there. Right here, if you click on Schedule of Events, so I'm going to open it. Let me just open in a new window. And you get something that looks like that. It's weird the way they have it set up. It's not a PDF. They have it written like this. But there's a print topics option, so let me just go there. Let's see what happens. So I'm just going to print test dates for Workkeys. Go ahead and print. Let's see what happens. Well, alright, so we're doing online testing. So when are the dates for online testing? Can you tell me? Anyone? That's right. Do you have to start on October 6th? No. Most of you don't, because you're still trying to get ready for the testing. But don't wait until April 1st. And the reason is because if you want to retest, and we're going to talk about this again today, how many days do you have to wait to retest? Do y'all remember? Yeah. So you have to have 30 calendar days have to pass, and then you can test on the next day. So 31 days. On the 31st day, you can retest. So don't wait until April 1st to do any of this testing, because you're stuck with whatever score you see. Okay? Alright. Any questions before we go on? Okay. Alright, so let me go ahead and X out of this. Alright. And when you go through there, you see something about orientation, configuration. Remember yard using. Hey Stephanie, can you, or Tanya, can you mute yourself? Thank you. Thanks. Tanya, can you, thank you. So this is online, so remember, as we did before, you have to do a system, a TAL system check and all that. So we're going to talk about that in another meeting. So Workkeys Online is not an easy thing to deal with. There's some stuff you got to do to get ready for it. But we are going to come back to this page in a subsequent meeting. Rashad, you had a question? Okay, so were you able to get into success? Okay, so when you go to success, let's see if I can get to it. All right, when you go to success, you see this page, right? Okay, you don't see this? All right, so okay, just send me an email and I'll have to figure out why you don't see it. Okay? All right, thank you. All right, anyone else? Okay. All right, so now I want to go back to the Canvas course. So what I want to do is start talking about the administration manual. We're not going to do all of it today. We'll continue on Friday. It will be recorded if you can't attend Friday. But when we get into, and this is important, when we get into where you have to upload students, that is not an easy process. If those of you that are new, those that have done it before will tell you that you're going to get some errors in the upload. So that's where you're going to have to call Workkeys and have them help you to figure out why you got an error. All right, but it's not an easy process. So when we get to that point, it is very important that you are part of this, the meetings when we get to that point. All right, so I'm going to go to, if you click on the administration manual, which I already have it up here, I have some things highlighted. Let me go ahead and make it larger. Okay, so what we're going to do from now until, I'm not going to keep you till 11. I'm going to try and get, there's certain pages I want to get done today, so that way we can continue on Friday. At this time, we're going to also do it from 9 to 11 on Friday. Okay, so when you get to this point, and a number of the pages, 1 and so on, so that part here where it says standardized procedures, you're going to read in your own, and I'm going to read anything in I guess that's purple. I'm going to read anything in purple. And then anything in green, you read on your own. All right, so let's look at the relationship with ACT. Test coordinators, substitute test coordinators, room supervisors, and proctors are required to complete online training. And you can access this training at this site. You just copy and paste. Click on the administration training button and you will see training options available to you. Once completed, you're going to submit a test site staff Workkeys manual verification form. And this online form is located on the training plan section of the webpage. So when we went to the PANEX, we went into where you saw 1, 2, steps 1, 2, and so on, it's in there. So when we get to that point later on, I'll show you where it is. Alright, and then test dates and times. So each standard time Workkeys assessment is 55 minutes. So there are 3 of them, 55 minutes. The standard time Workkeys test given in Spanish is 70 minutes. You may administer all tests in one session with breaks between tests, administer each test separately on different days, or administer the test in combination of these 2 options. Be sure to allow examinees the appropriate amount of time to complete each test. There is no particular order to give these. Okay? So, but they are 55 minutes. The standard time is 55 minutes, and then the standard time for Workkeys in Spanish is 70 minutes. Okay, equal treatment. All staff are required to administer and supervise the test in a non-discriminatory manner and in accordance with the applicable laws, including the American Disabilities Act, Individuals with Disability Education Act, and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. Confidentiality, page 3. Information about examinees, including their names, is confidential. To ensure confidentiality, you and your testing staff may not copy documents containing individually identifiable information or use such information for any purposes other than administering the test. All forms and information contained in administration manual and other ACT-approved documentation are the property of ACT and must not be shared with any person who is not part of the testing staff. All right, let's talk about safety. The safety of staff and examinees at the test site is of utmost importance. If an examinee or other person becomes confrontational or disruptive, take reasonable steps to defuse the situation. Contact security personnel at your institution or local law enforcement if you need assistance. Do not put yourself or others at risk. Report the incident to ACT immediately and document the details as an irregularity. So we're going to talk about regularities at some point. I don't think any of you have ever had this issue where you had where a student was confrontational or disruptive. So we've never had that issue. Investigations. In case of suspected or documented irregularities, all testing staff are obligated to cooperate fully with ACT in subsequent investigations and respond to requests for information in a timely manner. In cases where examinees dispute an ACT decision or communication regarding the administration, the examinees and or their representatives may contact you directly and request information. Right to terminate. ACT reserves the right to terminate its relationship with any test site or testing personnel without advance notice if ACT determines, in its sole discretion and for any reason, that determination is appropriate. All right. Then we and you're going to see this with ACT as well. But there's a section of authorized observers. An observer authorized by ACT may visit your test site. Such a visit is normally not announced in advance. If an observer arrives, take the following steps before allowing access to the testing area or test materials. Check your credentials. Observers must have the following: a photo ID, driver's license, employer ID, etc. Employer ID, business card, etc., showing company agency affiliation, and written authorization from ACT. Note, if an observer has an employer ID with a photo, a separate photo ID is not needed. Number 2, if the observer provides the necessary credentials, give the observer your full attention. If not, deny access to the testing area and test materials. 3, include the observer's name and company agency and whether or not the observer was admitted in an irregularity. 4, call ACT if you have concerns about an observer. Note, the visit may include conducting enhanced test security procedures on test day. Alright, unauthorized observers and media. To protect examinees from anxiety and distractions, unauthorized persons, including parents, guardians, children, school board members, recruiters, employers, and members of the media, must not be allowed to enter, observe, or photograph testing documents, test rooms, or preliminary activities. They must stay away from the test location until after the administration. Under no circumstances are cameras of any type allowed in the test rooms. Media coverage must be limited to meeting with examinees with their consent after the test administration and away from the test rooms. Please inform ACT Media Relations at that number of any media request to report on a test administration. ACT will contact members of the media to explain its policies. This will help to ensure each request or question is uniformly answered. Alright, so a while ago we talked about retest policy. So keep in mind, I have it in my handwriting. My handwriting's not great, but it says LDO policy when we talked about it. You must wait 30 calendar days, then test on day 31 if you need to retest. For a subsequent administration of a test in the same skill area, it is strongly recommended that an examiner receive intervention training before retesting. And that's the reason for the 30 days. LDOE wants you to provide intervention and training. When the examinee attempts to retest, the test delivery platform will automatically assign the examinee to an alternate test form, so they will not receive the same form. The examinee may take all available forms without a waiting period. Okay, now let me rephrase that. So let me just say this. ACT does allow a student to retake the test either the same day or the next day. But what is LDOE's policy? What's LDOE's policy? You must wait how many days? 30 days, and you can do it on the next day, the 31st day. But that second bullet, I don't want you to confuse it with LDOE's policy. ACT does allow others, well, any state, any institution, to retest students on that same skill area, that same day, the next day, or whenever. But if you want that score to count towards your SPS, you have to wait 30 days plus 1. Okay, now after the examinee has taken all available forms, so let's say that on what's one of the tests? Applied math. So let's say on applied math there's only 5 versions, 5 forms. So the student takes all 5 forms. I don't think any one of you have ever tested a student 5 times on this, but let's say there are 5 forms. Then the student has exhausted all possible forms. Then the student must wait 30 days before testing again. And then the retest is going to be one of the forms they've already taken. Alright. Score reports. An instant score report is available through the administration realm as soon as an examinee has completed testing. And those of you who've done it before, those of you that are new, let me just say this. Whenever a student completes a test, you will then give the student their score report. You'll print it out. And it's very easy to do this, and you'll learn more about that in a subsequent training. More reports are available by going to your Validas portal, and all of you, I asked you to make sure you had access to Validas. When obtaining an instant score report, pop-up blockers must be turned off. Business writing, okay, we don't do business writing, so I'm going to go ahead and skip that one. We don't do business writing. Now let's talk about testing with accessibility supports. So there are types of accessibility supports. Accessibility supports permitted during testing are designed to remove barriers to examinee access to the test and honor the content the test measure. It is important to abide by all outlined requirements for administering supports. So these are types of supports. You have universal supports, you have designated supports, you have English learner supports, and you have accommodations. So let's talk about universal supports. So here's an example of universal support, an answer eliminator. So on the online test, they're going to have the ability, some app, I don't want to say the word app, but some ability to be able to cross out certain answers. That's what that is. And every student will be able to do that. Not just those with accommodations, but any student. That's why they call it universal support. It's available to all students. Designated supports are available to any examinee for whom a need has been identified. So most require advanced planning to deliver. So here are some examples. Testing in a small group or one-on-one. So you may have a parent, remember we're still in that COVID thing, you may have a parent that may ask you, I want my child, even though they don't have accommodations, I want my child to test by themselves. That would be a designated support for that student. Okay? Food, drink, or access to medication for examinees with medical needs. That's a designated support. A written copy of verbal instructions. That's a designated support. Let's talk about English learner supports. Now, these only apply to English learners. So that student must be classified as an EL student. So EL supports are limited to the following. ACT authorized word-to-word bilingual dictionary. Now, it's a word-to-word only, no definitions. And one of the things we're going to talk about at some point in other meetings is this: that dictionary, that word-to-word bilingual dictionary cannot have any writing in it, or highlighting, or any papers inside. So one of the things you're going to have to do right before testing or in test day is for any EL student with a bilingual dictionary, you're going to have to check that dictionary for any writing, highlighting, or any papers inside. If any of this occurs, that student cannot use that dictionary. Now you can provide them with one from the school, but if they bring their own, and you see this in there, anywhere in there, it could be in the last page, you cannot let them use it. Another EL support is translated verbal instructions, and that's provided locally. Translated written test directions, and that's provided by ACT. And then an EL learner without any accommodations. An EL learner, remember there are some EL learners, EL students that don't need accommodations, so just classified as EL. They will get 1.5 time only. And then you can provide them with small group testing. Alright, so any questions on EL, on English learner supports? Okay, let's talk about accommodations now. Alright, now this is important. Accommodations. So there are some EL learners that do have accommodations. Accommodations are made available only for examinees with disabilities as documented in an IEP, a 504 plan, or another accommodations support plan. Examinees with accommodations must use the designated accommodations test materials. Examinees with the same testing times should test together as a group unless an accommodation requires one-to-one testing. So here are examples of accommodations. In EBR, the first 2 bullets are the most common ones. So timing, scheduling supports, extra testing time, breaks as needed, audio supports, pre-recorded audio, human reader using a reader script, text to speech. For audio support, it's going to be text to speech for the most part because it's online. You're not going to do pre-recorded audio because you don't have a test booklet in front, so it's going to be text to speech. And then you can do response supports, sign language interpreter, and alternate formats such as Braille or large print. Now, I don't think anyone has implied to me that you're going to need Braille or large print. But if you do, you need to let me know quickly so we can figure out how to deal with this. Alright, qualifications for accessibility support. Let's talk about authorization. Alright, test coordinator identifies examinees who qualify to test with an accommodation, or if they're English learner with limited English proficiency, or designated supports based on an identified need. Diagnostic documentation is not provided to ACT. So there's a difference between documentation. So remember I asked you to make sure you have access to TAA, that test accessibility portal? That's for ACT. So you are going to upload documentation for accommodations into TAA for ACT tests. For Workkeys, you don't. The ACT does not require any uploaded documentation. But you are going to have to make sure that you keep copies of it, because if there's an investigation, you're going to have to prove that that student actually did need those accommodations and or supports. All right. So, any questions before I go on? All right. Okay. Determine accessibility supports based on need. Some options for examinees with visual impairments, like a human reader, scribe to mark responses, extra testing time. Here are some options for examinees with hearing impairments: interpreter for verbal instructions, a copy of the verbal instructions for examinee to read, interpreter for test questions using a reader script for paper testing, extra testing time. Some options for examinees with learning disabilities, which is what most of your students will be, a human reader or pre-recorded audio, extra testing time, scribe to mark responses. Some options for examinees with physical disabilities, scribe to mark responses, large test print, extra testing time. Note, if an examinee responds in an alternate method, testing staff need to carefully transfer responses to be scored. But for the most part, everything is done online. So there's not going to be any paper version of this, unless it's a student that needs Braille or large print. Okay, so before I go on, up here at the corner I had ACT Workkeys Accessibility Support. So I'm going to go back to the Canvas course, and you see right here where it has Accessibility Supports Guide. I'm going to download that. I'm going to click on that arrow. It's going to download, and this is what you need to be looking at as well. So this is a full description of the accessibility supports for both online and paper. So this includes paper as well, but we're only doing online. So you go through there and just kind of show you something. It's 26 pages. So let's see. So for 21-22, here they have. So those of you that have done this before, in the previous year, the word was called extra time. This time it's called extra testing time. So sometimes they change the words in different manuals. So that's what this is. Okay. So on page, I guess this is page 4. On page 4, this is where they start talking about the accessibility supports. So remember we mentioned universal supports, designated supports, English learner supports, and accommodations. So they have a better description of each support here than they did in the manual. So just go here and make sure you read this. So for the EL learners, remember they're not always going to be Spanish. You could have a few that may be another language. So the translated written test directions are available in these languages. So just keep that in mind. They have a section on accommodations. They have a section on modifications. Let me just mention this. Modifications or alterations that are sometimes used during testing. These changes what a test is designed to measure and prevent meaningful interpretation of examinee's score. Modifications are not permitted during testing. So for example, suppose an EL learner is testing by themselves, and before the test you change their timing code from 1.5 to 2 hours, let's say. That's a modification. You modified what they were supposed to be doing. So that is not permitted. That's basically what it's saying in terms of online testing. Authorization, we talked about that. Documentation is not necessary. Let me rephrase that. You don't have to provide documentation ACT, but you do have, look right here, keep written documentation secure in file for 1 year after testing. So for every student that's going to need accommodations or English learner supports or designated supports, you must keep documentation for at least 1 year. Then they talk about accessibility supports based on need. So make sure you look at that. That's page 7. And then administration report for Workkeys. And then descriptions of accessibility supports. So talk about it a little bit more. All right, and then they break it down into a table. So these are your accessibility supports. So notice there's accessibility supports. I'm going to scroll down a bit further. Accessibility supports, accessibility supports, accessibility supports, and let's see. Okay, so let's go back to the accessibility supports. All right. So these are accessibility supports. I'm trying to figure out which one a student would probably use. The answer eliminator. So this is available for all tests. So it's universal support for online testing. Remember, we don't do paper. So this is available for the online testing. So each student is able to use the answer eliminator. Let's see, the audio amplification designated for support of online tests is available in all tests. Here's the one for the bilingual for the EL learner. This is an accommodation. So now they'll distinguish between a designated support, a universal support, and accommodation. So an accommodation, this is an accommodation. So for the EL learner, it must be part of their plan, their learning plan. So before you allow that accommodation, you got to make sure that the EL learner has in their plan a bilingual word-to-word dictionary for use. So there are designated supports, there are accommodations, and there are universal supports. So you can read through each one to see which one is needed. There are breaks as needed. I don't think almost all of, except for maybe one, had some students that had breaks. So breaks as needed, but it must be an accommodation. So it must be in their plan. Must be in their plan. So before I go on, any questions on all this? They have a countdown timer, and that's a universal support. So universal means that anyone is available to all students. That's what universal is. Any questions? Is extra testing time a universal support? Can someone answer that? Is extra testing time at universal? Is that available to all students? No, it's only available to accommodation. And an EL learner that needs more than time and a half. Remember, all EL learners will get, if a student's designated an EL learner, they'll get time and a half. But if they have a disability that requires more time, then you can give them extra testing time. and we'll talk about the available testing times in a little while. Highlighter, that's a universal support, but they wouldn't need a highlighter. I don't see, oh, okay. On the online test, there is a highlighter. And y'all seen that before. There's a highlighter in the online test. Human reader is only available for paper testing. So will any of you be using a human reader? No. So I need for you to make sure that when you determine your accommodations for the online testing, that you're looking at this, because it specifically indicates whether it's an accommodation, whether it's a designated support or a universal support, and whether it's available for online, paper, or both. So make sure you're looking at that. Okay. So let's see, I'm going to scroll down. Alright, and then all this is right here is a detailed description of what you see in this table. So if you want a more detailed description of it, you'll see it here. Alright, then we'll scroll down, and I think that's about it. The countdown timer, remember that's a universal. So the definition is a timing device which shows the time allowed for the test and counts down to no time remaining when the administration starts. So the universal support is available for, it's a universal support for online testing. So when the student takes the test, and you may remember, those of you that have done it, there's a countdown already there, right? Is that correct? Because I've never been in a room where that test was given, but y'all have. So when a student takes the test, they see the countdown timer. Okay, thank you. All right. Okay, so just go through each of those, especially those of you that are new, because you've never given this before. Remember, pre-recorded audio you're not going to use because that's only for paper testing. For online, it's going to be called text-to-speech online. That's this right here, text-to-speech. So that's an accommodation for online testing. Okay, and the scratch paper for the math, for the applied math, you're going to provide them with scratch paper. You are going to, when the test ends, you're going to pick up that scratch paper. You're not going to have them keep it. Okay, so that was that. Any questions on this before we go back to the manual? Alright, so let me just quickly go back to the manual. Let's see, this one here. Alright, yes. Yes. So, remember in ACT, the text-to-speech is applied to all tests. On LEAP it's not. So don't confuse LEAP with ACT. All right, thank you. But no, that's a good question, and we'll get closer to testing, especially with ACT, because with those you're going to upload your accommodations, and you're going to get something back that says they get text-to-speech with ELA, and that's because they have that accommodation that applies to all of those 4 tests for ACT. But for LEAP, that doesn't apply. Alright, so I'm going to go back to, alright, page 8 is where they talk about the timing for test in English. So, alright. So the standard, this part's English and this part is in Spanish. So this is the test that's given in English, and this is the test that's given in Spanish. So for English, here are your times. The standard time is 55 minutes. For your EL learners, here are their times, and it's built in. So when you go, and we're going to do this later, but you're going to upload your students, you're going to do a couple of things, but then you have to register the students for the test. and you have to set their timing code. And so you're going to have to make sure you set the timing code correctly. There may have been one or two of you last year that kind of messed up on that with a few students. So for time and a half, these are their minutes. That's all they get. If a student has an accommodation that requires double time, these are their minutes for each test. And the tests that our students take are workplace documents, applied math, and graphic literacy. Those are the 3 tests in Workkeys. If a student requires triple time based on their accommodations, then these are the number of minutes. All right. Now, before I go on, with online, remember this is not paper. Paper did matter, but with online, can you give this test in any order? Anyone? Yes, you can. All right, you can give this test in any order. But remember, if you have a group of students in one day working on 2 different tests, they must be in 2 different rooms. They must all be in the same timing code. You're doing the same test. Okay? Then, if you're giving the test in Spanish, these are the minutes. These are the minutes. All right, any questions before we go on? Okay. Testing more than one examinee at a time. ACT encourages group administrations for examinees authorized for the same timing and similar accommodations. If more than 20 examinees will test in one room, a proctor is required to assist. All examinees in the room must have the same authorized timing and must be working in the same test. So I mentioned that a while ago. So in administering test 1, all examinees must be working on test 1. Testing with interpreters, readers, or scribes. Examinees may be authorized to test with interpreter, reader, or scribe. Interpreter. An interpreter may sign verbal instructions if authorized by the test coordinator. Sign systems for verbal instructions include American Sign Language or signing exact English and cue speech. When signing verbal instructions only, the administration does not need to be one-on-one. An interpreter may sign test items if authorized by the test coordinator. Signed systems for test items include signing exact English or cue speech following the reader script. No other signed systems are allowed for test items. The interpreter follows the test content verbatim without adding explanation. When signing test items, this must be a one-to-one administration. Now let's talk about the reader. Okay, this is available for papers. We're not going to do that. Now the scribe. A scribe may be authorized for examinees who are unable to mark multiple choice answers. So even online, they may have issues with their hand. During the test, the examiner dictates answers to the scribe who marks responses. The examinee must be tested one-on-one. Alright, so then you talk about interpreter, reader, and scribe qualifications. So I'm not going to read that. I should have put that in green. Y'all can do that yourself. One other thing I do need to mention though. To protect the examinee and the reader or interpreter from questions of possible conflict of interest, the following conditions must also be met. The reader interpreter must not be a relative or guardian of the examinee and not be engaged in test preparation activities for ACT Workkeys during the current academic year. Test scores achieved under the supervision of an individual who does not satisfy all the requirements listed in the section above will be canceled. Testing with text-to-speech, that's online. Examinees authorized for text-to-speech may test as a group if they have their own headphones, can control the progress of their own device, and are working on the same test at the same time. Examinees are able to replay any portion of any test as needed within the time allowed for each test. Okay, so then we talk about testing facilities. So the test coordinator must select a test site and reserve rooms for test administration. Test site and rooms must meet several requirements that help ensure a fair and secure test environment. Let's see. Um, so, let me just go ahead and read this. Principles of accessibility. Under the Americans with Disability Act, tests must be offered in locations accessible to individuals with disabilities, or in rare cases, inaccessible alternate locations. So those of you that have done this before, where have you tested in your school? I mean, it has to be in a place where there are computers. Where have you tested? Okay. Anybody else? That's probably where your computers are. It's probably in the lab. All right. So those of you that are new, you got to make sure that you have computers for the students that are being tested. So if you have 20 students in a room, you better have 20 working computers in that room. Alright, I'm on this part here, selecting facilities. Select facilities that allows testing staff to control access to testing areas, have a phone that staff can use on test day. They cannot bring a cell phone in the room, keep that in mind. You may also want to have a room to use as a test day headquarters for staff and materials. Okay, selecting test rooms. When selecting test rooms, you can read all of this yourself, but I want to point out the ones that have arrows to it. Make sure you have computers with high-speed internet access. You have access to a printer because you're going to be printing the score reports for the students. And then you have a supervisor computer for administrative monitoring. So we're going to talk about TAO later on. So as a coordinator or as a supervisor, you're going to be able to see where each student is on the test, what question they're on, when they finish, what part of the test they're on, and so on. So that's what this is. And you're going to do that through TAO. Observing examinees testing in multiple rooms from a central location, such as a hallway, through glass walls or security cameras, is prohibited. Avoid rooms with multiple levels or graduated seatings unless you have no alternative. Rooms type, size, and setup. ACT recommends using single levels classrooms. Avoid multiple level seating. I think all computer labs are single level anyway. Seating 15 to 30 examinees in a room for standard time administrations. And seating no more than 100. I don't think there's any computer lab with more than 100 students. Although you could use Chromebooks, right? Put them in a room. Have any of you used Chromebooks? Yeah. Now I want to say this: if you have those students whose IEP says small group, you must use small group. And what is small group in Louisiana? How many students? 8 or less, right? 8 or less. Small group. Yes. Okay. Yeah, so Karen, or let's see who else is on here. Tanya, when a student finishes a test, and do y'all print the test reports for the students? Okay, Tanya? Alright, Zaviola, you never did that? Oh, okay, no, you can do it afterwards, but do you give it to the students? Okay, no, that's fine. Yeah, but just make sure the student gets a copy of the test report as well. Yeah. No, you don't. I don't think you wanna do it in the testing room where the students are, because the printer makes noise. So, but Karen and Tanya, if I'm not mistaken, I think you're in a different room. Is that correct? Okay. Okay. And that's what Savioli does, I think. No, that's okay. No, that's fine. That's fine. That's why we're here. And I could have been processing it differently as well. All right. Thank you for that question. All right. But don't forget, if a student has in their IEP that small group, you must test in a group 8 or less. All right. To ensure a fair and secure testing environment, cover or remove materials that may give examinees an unfair advantage, such as charts, strategy maps, or other aids relevant to test taking, problem solving, writing essays, or topics. Geographic maps and the periodic table do not need to be covered. Ensure that examinees will be able to hear the room supervised without difficulty. If necessary, arrange for a microphone. Examinees testing with extended time must be tested in a separate room from examinees testing with standard time. Arrange the room so that the room supervisor will be facing the examinees during testing. Testing staff can freely circulate the room and have a clear view of all examinees and materials, and seating minimizes the possibility of prohibitive behavior. Now, I'm going to say this. If you test a student in, let's say, November, and there was a prohibitive behavior, you cannot test that student for the remainder of the school year. Is that clear? All right, so that student is done. The student cannot retest for the remainder of the school year for Workkeys. Workkeys, okay? All right. Ensure and quiet test sessions. Just go ahead and read that. Seating arrangements for online. Notice it says if the room has no carrels, dividers, or partitions between workstations, then the workstations must face the same direction. Must be spaced so examinees are at least 3 feet apart. Now, right now with COVID, they have to be 3 feet apart, or is it 6 feet for students? Do y'all know? 6 feet? Okay. So when you're testing, you gotta, even though it says 3 feet here for COVID, it has to be 3. And hopefully by the time, I think right now in Louisiana the cases are going down. So hopefully at that point we'll be back to something like maybe 6 feet. 3 feet away from each other. All right, and then shoulder to shoulder, at least 5 feet apart. Front and at least 5 feet apart, front to back, measured head to head. Must be set up so that examinees in one row cannot see the screens of other examinees' computers in front of or to the side of them. If there are carrels, dividers, or partitions between them, they do not need to be face to face in the same direction. They do not need to face in the same direction, and they may face the wall or each other if there is adequate privacy between examinees. If it's a U-shaped seating configuration, they must face outward from the center of the U-shaped configuration, and they must be spaced at least 3 feet apart. All right, those of you with a computer lab, do you have any questions on what I just read? All right, what about the Chromebooks? So you're in a classroom, so that's the area where you have no carrels, dividers, or partitions because you're in a classroom with Chromebooks. So you are following all this, right? All right. Work surfaces, all that says is that the work surfaces must be smooth, part surfaces large enough for examiners to work comfortably. Because in the math part, they're gonna have scratch paper to do some work on. They talk about left-handed examinees, and then we're not going to do off-site testing. You're all going to test at your own site. And then these are the seating arrangements for online testing. So they talk about acceptable, unacceptable. It's not very clear right here It's kind of blurry. Okay, now here's something let's talk about staff requirements real quick. So, who may act as staff? The test coordinator is responsible for identifying people of integrity when selecting their testing staff. Room supervisors, the technical coordinator, and proctors may be current or retired faculty members. Human resource staff, trainers, school administrative or clerical employees, substitute teachers, student teachers, paraprofessionals. All testing staff are required to administer and supervise the test in a non-discriminatory manner and in accordance with all applicable laws. Who may not act as testing staff? High school students, volunteers, and lower division undergraduates. Anyone who intends to take the same test within 12 months. Anyone involved in test preparation activities for the same test at any time during the previous 90 days due to potential conflict of interest. ACT recognizes that a normal duty of a counselor or training may involve some responsibility for test preparation. These activities are not a conflict of interest, provided they are part of job responsibilities specifically defined by one's employer, and the employer is not a third-party enterprise. Relatives, I asked you to complete a form. Some of you did, some of you did not. We'll go to that form in a little while. To protect you and other relatives or wards from allegations of impropriety. If a relative or ward will test at your site, you may not serve as test coordinator or substitute test coordinator for the administration of test that day. You must delegate all supervisory responsibilities for that date, including the receipt and return materials, to a qualified colleague. You may not have access to secure test materials before or after the test day window. You may serve as room supervisor or proctor, provided that examinee is not assigned to the test in a room where you are working. You must not have access to any of the examinee's test materials. Relatives and wards includes children, stepchildren, grandchildren, nieces, nephews, siblings, in-laws, spouses, and persons under your guardianship. Scores for an examinee will be canceled if any of these policies are violated. Now I want to go to, if I can find it. Alright, let me see where it is. I had it up earlier. Here it is. Okay, so these are the ones that have submitted that form where I asked you to, for that ACT verification. So if you have not completed it, make sure you go to that link I gave you earlier. So a second. Alright, so if you need that link again, just let me know and I'll send it to you. But these are the only ones that I've verified so far. Now, Katina, who's your backup? Is Katina on here? I don't think Katina's on here. Alright, well, okay. So Katina says she has a relative that's doing ACT. So what the rest of you, all of you who turned it in have said no to both situations. So what Katina is going to do, Katina can still do all the work. Now this is online. Oh, by the way, I'm going to say this for ACT. ACT is online this year, but if it's accommodations, you can still provide accommodations paper-based. We're going to talk about that when we get into the ACT part. But for Katina, she will not be able to handle any test materials. She can still do all the other work, but not test materials. Anyone has any questions? Samuel, you had your hand raised, or was that from earlier? Rashada? Okay. All right. Did you complete it? No, this is the verification. Yeah. If you can't find the link in your email, just send me an email and I'll send it to you. Alright. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to, and I want to keep you any longer. Let me see where I am. Okay, so what we're gonna do next time is we're going to start here at the word attentiveness, and then the staff role and responsibilities, and we'll continue with that on Friday. Okay? Now before we go, let me go back and let me see if I can paste it again. Those of you came after, just make sure, and I put in chat the form, the sign-in sheet I need for you to complete. So make sure you do that, because once we end, you're not going to have access to that again. And we are required to have a sign-in sheet. Okay, before we end this, is there any questions from any of you at this point? Everybody feeling okay? All right, how's everything going besides this at your school? Are you being funny, or is it actually doing okay? You're doing okay with it? All right, yeah, just do the best you can. It's challenging, but just do the best you can. Anything else? All right, did all of you complete that sign-in sheet? All right, anyone not do it? Okay. All right, I'm gonna put the recording in the Canvas course, and I'll also send it to all of you, even those that did not attend. And if you have any questions, ladies and gentlemen, I will end this. Have a great day, and don't forget, if you need to be at the 1 o'clock meeting today, that's that ANET office hours, and then make sure you're there as well. And if you're not, I'll record it also. All right, so that's it. I'll go ahead and end this. Bye, Tanya. Bye, all of you. Bye, Karen. Bye, everybody.